Ukraine's war for survival has collided with a battle inside its own halls of power. On Saturday, a stunning confrontation unfolded in Kyiv, not on the battlefield, but inside parliament itself. Ukraine's top anti-corruption investigators say security forces tried to block them from raiding offices inside the Verkhovna Rada. Officers from the National Anti-Corruption Bureau were stopped at the gates of one of the most heavily guarded compounds in the country. For hours, investigators were kept out. Only later were they allowed inside, and what they were chasing could shake Ukraine's leadership to its core. According to Ukraine's anti-graft agencies, an undercover operation has exposed an organized criminal group, one that allegedly includes sitting members of parliament. Investigators say lawmakers took bribes in exchange for votes, cash for power, votes for sale, and resistance from the very security services meant to protect the state. NABU officers are being resisted during investigative actions, the agency said, accusing state security employees of obstructing the probe inside parliamentary committees. The details remain sealed, but the timing could not be worse. The investigation exploded into public view just as President Volodymyr Zelensky was leaving the country, headed to the United States for high-stakes talks on ending the war. At the same moment, Russian drones and missiles slammed into Kyiv, killing one civilian, wounding dozens, and plunging parts of the capital into darkness. Missiles outside. Corruption inside, and public anger boiling over. Ukraine is already reeling from a cascade of scandals, including the resignation of Zelenskyy's chief of staff and revelations of $100 million kickback scheme in the energy sector, allegedly masterminded by a personal friend of the president. As Russia hammers Ukraine's power grid and winter approaches, blackouts are spreading, heating shortages loom, and trust in institutions is fraying. For Zelensky, this is a critical moment. Once politically unchallenged, he now faces pressure from every direction. Russian advances on the battlefield, growing demands from Washington to cede territory and hold elections during wartime, and renewed scrutiny over corruption at home. The irony is stark. Just months ago, Zelensky attempted to curb the independence of Ukraine's two key anti-corruption agencies, NABU and SAPO, institutions created after the pro-Western revolution of 2014. That move triggered rare wartime protests. European allies pushed back hard, and Zelensky was forced to reverse course. Now, those same agencies are targeting Parliament itself. Ukraine's corruption problem is not new. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, graft and weak rule of law have haunted the country and remain among the biggest obstacles to Kyiv's bid for European Union membership. But this moment feels different because the war has raised the stakes, because the country is fighting for survival, and because the question is no longer just whether Ukraine can defeat Russia, but whether it can clean its own house while doing so. As bombs fall from the sky and investigators push through locked doors, Ukraine's future is being tested on two fronts, and neither battle can be lost.
Ukraine's next election may not look like any it has held before. With millions displaced by war, voices inside Kyiv are floating a radical idea: voting online. Supporters say it could protect turnout. Critics warn it could open a new political battlefield over legitimacy. Ukraine's political clock is ticking. President Volodymyr Zelensky's term expired in May 2024, but elections remain suspended under martial law. Now, as questions grow louder at home and abroad, a senior ally of Zelensky is signaling that Kyiv may need a new approach to voting, one that goes beyond traditional polling stations. David Arakamia, the head of Zelensky's parliamentary bloc, says Ukraine should seriously consider hybrid elections, both in person and online. The aim, to reach millions of Ukrainians who fled abroad during the war and those displaced inside the country. Opening polling stations overseas, he argues, is costly, legally complex, and in some cases impossible. For Kyiv, turnout is not just a technical issue, it's a strategic one. Arakamia warns that low participation would hand critics an opening to challenge the election's legitimacy. He says Russia and other opponents could use weak turnout to dismiss the results entirely, something Ukraine wants to avoid at all costs. But the idea of online voting is deeply divisive. A recent poll shows nearly half of Ukrainians oppose internet ballots, citing fears of falsification and abuse of power. For a country already fighting a war, both militarily and informationally, trust in the process could prove decisive. Internally displaced Ukrainians face their own barriers. Arakamia says many avoid registering at new locations out of fear of being flagged for military mobilization. That reality, he argues, further weakens turnout and strengthens the case for remote voting options. Moscow has already labeled Zelensky illegitimate, arguing power now lies with Ukraine's parliament. Russian President Vladimir Putin recently said Russia could pause deep strikes on election day, but only if Ukrainians living in Russia are allowed to vote. The statement adds yet another geopolitical layer to an already fragile debate.
We didn't demand anything. We were doing what we considered necessary. I think that current representatives of the Kyiv regime can do the same if they want it. But if they want to use the elections only to stop the offensive of Russian troops, it's a wrong choice. We are ready to think about ensuring security during the elections in Ukraine, at least to halt, refrain from striking deep into the territory on the election day. Millions of Ukrainian citizens, 5 to 10 million by various estimates, live in Russia who have the voting rights. If there were elections, we have the right to demand from the organizers that Ukrainians living in Russia have the right to vote in Russia.
For Kyiv, the choice is fraught with risk. Online voting could boost participation or fuel claims of manipulation. Either way, Ukraine's next election won't just decide leadership, it may shape how legitimacy itself is defined during wartime.